They called it a gift. That was the word presiding delegate Sorath Vel used when he read the instrument into the record. A gift, extended in the spirit of the Assembly's founding charter, to a species that had petitioned for transit access across the outer approaches for 11 years and been declined, each time, on the grounds that Earth's registration credentials did not meet the minimum threshold for corridor licensing under the Verath Compact's secondary governance framework. The word landed in the chamber with the weight Vel intended. There were 340 delegates in that room, and most of them settled back into their seats when he said it. A gift, the magnanimous body, extending its hand to the smaller one. I watched it from the gallery and said nothing. I had been the Assembly's embedded trade observer for 9 years by then. My name was on a dozen routine filings, my face known to the corridor clerks and the archival staff and the junior delegates who worked the late session rotations. I was furniture. That was the point. My predecessor had understood it, and her predecessor before her, and the line of quiet human functionaries stretching back to the original petition had understood it too, that what you see in a room depends entirely on where you are sitting, and that furniture sees everything. The corridor was designated Outer Approach Transit Lane 7 Theta, 112 light-years. Point of origin at the edge of Earth's registered logistics envelope. Terminus, at a relay waypoint the Assembly used for agricultural shipments to 3 of its outer member systems. Single lane, speed restricted, filed under Class 6 licensing, which meant Earth could move registered cargo along its length, call for assistance at Assembly relay posts if something went wrong, and do nothing else. No branching, no sub-licensing, no waypoint registration rights along the corridor's interior length. Or so the instrument read on its face. Delegate Vel presented it to the chamber with the confidence of a man who had read every line himself. He had. I know because I watched his staff prepare the filing across 6 weeks of closed session, and I know because the instrument he drafted was, in all the ways that mattered to him, exactly what he believed it to be. He was not a careless man. He was a thorough one. The problem was that he had drafted it inside the Verath Compact's own procedural framework, which meant he had used the Compact's own definitional registers, which meant that every term in the instrument inherited every annotation, supplement, and standing cross-reference those registers had accumulated across 140 years of corridor licensing precedent. He had not read all 140 years. We had. Not me personally. The work had been done by a team of legal archivists cycling through the Assembly's own public records library over the better part of a decade, quiet and methodical, and entirely within their rights as registered observers with library access. What they found, buried in the secondary definitional register for Class 6 corridor instruments, was a clause that had been written into the framework during a licensing dispute in the Assembly's 43rd year of operation, and never subsequently amended. A clause that permitted the corridor license holder to file waypoint recognition instruments for any fixed installation established along the corridor's interior length for the purpose of navigational safety, provided those installations were registered under the license holder's own credentialing authority, and did not impede the corridor's primary traffic function. Navigational safety. The Assembly had been licensing corridors for 140 years. In that time, navigational safety installations had meant beacons, relay buoys, emergency transponder platforms, small things, filed in batches of 2 or 3, noted in the quarterly registry reports and forgotten. Nobody had ever asked what the clause's upper limit was, because nobody had ever needed more than a handful of buoys along any given corridor, and the clause's drafters had not felt the need to specify a ceiling. There was no ceiling. The first registration filing arrived at the Assembly's Corridor Registry Office 14 days after Delegate Vel's instrument was ratified and activated. It was submitted under Earth Mission's standard credentialing header, routed through the same procedural channel our archivists had used for library access requests, handled by the same junior clerk who processed our quarterly observer reports. It listed a single navigational safety installation, a fixed waypoint platform at the corridor's first interior junction point, registered under navigational safety provision of the Class 6 framework, designated in Earth's own filing language as Waypoint Marker 1. The clerk logged it, filed it, and moved on. The second filing arrived the following morning, then the third. By the end of the first month, 47 waypoint installations had been registered along 7 Theta's interior length. By the end of the second month, the number was 112, one for each light year of the corridor, give or take, each one a fixed navigational platform anchored under Earth's own credentialing authority at specific, legally recorded coordinates inside the Verath Assembly's licensed transit infrastructure. I was in the gallery the morning the registry chief brought the numbers to the floor. His name was Devon Oreth, a careful bureaucrat of 26 years' service, and he had the look of a man who had checked his own arithmetic 4 times before walking into the chamber, because he could not afford to be wrong about what he was about to say. He was not wrong. He read the count into the record. 340 delegates heard it. The chamber went the particular kind of quiet that happens when a large body of people simultaneously revises its understanding of the last 2 months. Our lead delegate, a woman named Kala Soren, was seated at the mission table on the floor below. She had been in that seat for the entire session. She did not look up. Delegate Vell called for an emergency procedural review. The review took 11 days. On the 12th day, the Assembly's own legal chamber delivered its finding. The filings were procedurally valid. The navigational safety clause carried no ceiling. Each registered waypoint platform was legally anchored under the terms of the instrument Delegate Vell himself had drafted and ratified. To void the registrations, the Assembly would need to amend the definitional register, a process requiring a 2/3 supermajority and a minimum 18-month drafting period, and even a successful amendment would apply only prospectively. The existing registrations were permanent. What the Assembly had given us was one corridor. What the corridor's own legal framework gave us was 112 anchored coordinates inside Assembly licensed space, each one registered under our own credentialing authority, each one carrying the full suite of waypoint registration rights that credentialing authority conveyed, including the right to file sub-licensing instruments for commercial and logistical activity within the waypoint's operational radius. We had been filing those too. I did not see the formal request for a meeting. I had rotated out of my gallery posting by then, reassigned to a coordination role that kept me off the assembly floor and closer to the filing teams. But I heard about the request the day it arrived, the same way everyone heard about things in that building, through the archive staff, who heard it from the corridor clerks, who had processed the outgoing communication and noted, with some confusion, that it had come back as undeliverable at the Earth mission's registered address. The address had changed, not to a new Earth mission address inside the Assembly's jurisdiction, to a coordination office at a waypoint platform registered 14 weeks earlier at the 89th interior junction of Outer Approach Transit Lane 7 Theta, a fixed installation anchored in space the Assembly had licensed to Earth for navigational safety purposes, operating under Earth's own credentialing authority, located 41 light minutes outside the nearest boundary of the Verath Assembly's primary administrative zone. The meeting, when it eventually happened, was held there, at a table we had built, in a room we had outfitted, at coordinates the Assembly had handed us inside an instrument their own presiding delegate had drafted and called a gift. Delegate Vell did not attend. I heard he had retired by then. I don't know if anyone told him. I suspect the records speak clearly enough on their own.